This is Hockey Talk, where we talk everything hockey, and I am John.
Mike.
All right, Mike, let's go and see if I can get it right this time because I couldn't the first time. First topic for tonight's discussion has to be the big trade between Carolina, Colorado, and Chicago. Now, I'm just going to go over a little bit about this. We've got a three-player deal. Colorado received forwards Jack Drury and Martin Necas, along with the second-round pick of 2025 and a fourth-round pick of 2026. Now, we're not going to go into all the details here, but I also wanted to say that the Blackhawks will also retain 50% of Rantanen's $9.25 million salary. Not bad. Rantanen is in the final year of a 6-year, $55.5 million contract, and he will become an unrestricted free agent, Mike, after this season. Mike, help me break this down. Who's going to win this trade and why?
Carolina's going to win this trade. They've got the best player in the deal. The guy's a beast. He can help carry a team. Like if you see what he did with McKinnon, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he's going to be reunited with Aho, who he played with back in Finland on the World Junior team there. Um, this guy's he's a superstar. Uh, not necessarily a McDavid, but he's up there. He's one of the top 10 guys in the league. Um, Makes Carolina an instant Stanley Cup contender. Plus the fact that they were able to pick up Taylor Hall on the side as well.
Not a
Just
bad
as
pick.
more or less some depth. But he
Yep.
brings experience. He's a veteran. He's a guy that you can plug into one of the top two lines if you get some injuries or whatnot. So Carolina wins this trade. Colorado did get a really good player in Martin Necas, but Andy signed for another year on top of this. But I really think that they should not have traded Rantanen. I think he was one of the big keys for getting them to have a push for the Stanley Cup this year.
Okay. Before we get into this a little bit deeper, because I do want to get into this a little bit, I just want to get to part B of this question. Now, Sportsnet has an article titled Shocked. And Rantanen says the trade to the Hurricanes hasn't sunk in quite yet. And Rantanen told reporters after his first game with Carolina that he didn't see this trade coming. Nathan MacKinnon said earlier Saturday that it was quote unquote sad. Mike, did the Avalanche panic? Because that's kind of what I'm wondering here. Did they panic and make this trade too early? Or was this a good move by Colorado? Even though they didn't get the best player, they got younger. Maybe it's better overall for them. What do you think?
I think that it was a bit of a panic move. I know that they were having discussions as far as a contract extension. And I know Rantanen wanted to make, big money. Uh, Colorado didn't want to pay him more than McKinnon. Understandable.
Yep.
However, I do think that he's at least right at the McKinnon salary level, uh, if at all. The salary cap's going up. When McKinnon signed his contract, the salary cap was much lower. The salary cap's projected to go up a few $1 million this year. So
It's over
you
four
know that
million. Yeah.
yeah. So it changes the landscape. So for him to ask for, you know, the rumor is he was asking for like 14 million, but he did say he was willing to take a discount to stay, which I'm pretty sure he would have. I think based off of the comments and all that sort of stuff, he really liked playing there, which is, it's unfortunate. I think he was a great fit in Colorado. Problem is I think Colorado uh, gave out too much money to some guys that I don't know if they're going to earn the money. So I think that took away some of their cap space that they were going to have in order to sign Rantanen. So the money that they gave Mackenzie Blackwood, like I had said previously, I think they overpaid him. They're basically bidding against themselves for him. So I don't think it was really necessary for them to go and throw that kind of money out there on a goalie that really hasn't done anything in the league. So as far as any other contracts, the Nikushkin contract is a little bit high based off of his performance and his issues that he's had. So
Right.
I know there was talk of them trying to, maybe trade him or get out of his contract at some point, but now I think he's there to stay. Now I don't know if they'll move on from him at this point, especially since they just traded Rantanen. So I think they should have waited till the off season, worst case scenario, or signed Rantanen and then made a corresponding move to trade another guy in the off season. I think would have been much better, but it is what it is. They did what they did, so
Mm-hmm. No taking it back now, right?
yeah,
But I was wondering if this. I was talking with one of our good friends, Claude. We were
yeah.
discussing this, and he brought up something. He's like, "Well, Colorado, I just don't think that they're good enough to win a cup right now. And so, if why sign Rantanen for all this money if you don't think you can win a cup? So let's trade him and get younger and see if we can't get better overall later on." Do you think that that had anything to do with what, am I crazy? Or is Claude and I crazy, thinking maybe
Uh,
Colorado isn't in a position to win a cup? I just I just remember how they did last year in the playoffs.
I think they are in a position to win the cup, or they
Okay.
were before this trade. I think there was other moves that they could have made. Maybe not big moves, obviously, because I know that they're up against the cap this year.
Right.
However, I mean, their defense is pretty good. They've got Makar, who's arguably the best defenseman in the league.
Right.
Um, they they've got Girard, they've got Taves, they've got some good depth. As far as up front too, I mean, they've got some good depth up front as well. And plus, Landeskog has started to participate in some practices. To what extent, they haven't really said, but it's a positive sign because I think he's probably going to be back for the playoffs, if not maybe before. So him coming back, having McKinnon, Rantanen, Nikushkin, Middlestat. I mean, I think they were good enough to go with what they had to be a contender to win the cup. So
Right.
now, I mean, they took a step down as far as I'm concerned with the trade. So who knows? We'll see. But I think I always thought right from the start of the season this year that they'd be one of the contenders in the West for the cup to go with Edmonton and Vegas. I didn't actually think Winnipeg would have as great of a season as they have had this year. So, and as well, Minnesota, they've actually played pretty well too. So, I mean, I had Colorado as a top three team in the West, and I still think that that they had the potential to win the cup this year.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's a fair assessment. And it's just Claude and I spitballing literally. And
Hmm.
both of us kind of thought, well, maybe Colorado wasn't really in a position to win the cup anyway. So maybe this trade makes sense. But I know you and I are of the same thought process. The team with the best player wins the trade. I mean, I've always thought that way.
Generally,
So,
that
yeah,
is how most trades pan out. Is the team that gets the best guy wins. I mean,
right,
we've seen so many trades over the years that really good players get traded for top end prospects or draft picks or whatnot, and generally the team that gets the top end player wins the trade. So
right, right. Okay, well, let's go on to our second topic. And this is something that kind of interests me, and I can't wait to watch some of this, is the Four Nations Cup. And Team Canada, they must replace Alex Pietrangelo on their blue line before the Four Nations tournament gets underway because he's injured. I guess he's out. The rumor
mhm.
mill is working overtime. Looks like the job is going to be maybe Drew Doughty's to lose. Now, Mike, the reason why I want to bring this up, not only because I'm interested in this tournament, but because you mentioned this very thing on our show several weeks ago that this could happen.
Yeah.
So, what do you think, Mike? Is there any reason why it might not be Drew Doughty? What do you think?
I think it's going to be Drew Doughty. I mean, he's a veteran. He's played about the same amount of years as Pietrangelo has. So yeah, it's it. I think they're going to want to replace Pietrangelo with a player that's very similar, and they are. I mean, and you can always count on Drew Doughty. He's a good offensive player, good defensive player. So I mean, he checks all the boxes. He plays physical. he plays a little more physical, I think, than Pietrangelo does. So, I mean,
Right.
I'm pretty sure that it's his spot to lose. I think he just came back. I believe tonight's his first game, or last night against Florida. Last night, it was last night against
Last
Florida.
night.
So,
Okay.
once he gets a handful of games under his belt, I'm pretty sure that they're gonna pick him as the replacement. I can't see why not. I'd be very surprised if it wasn't him.
Well, if it isn't him, we'll come back on the show and we'll talk about that.
Yeah,
I just thought it was interesting because you mentioned it like 3 weeks ago, maybe that he would be potentially
something like that.
four
I
weeks
know
ago.
it was
So
2-3 weeks ago. Yeah.
yeah, very, very interesting. And sure as shit, here it is. So there you go. Well, let's go on to our third topic for tonight, and that is we're going to talk a little bit about Morgan Rielly. Why Morgan Rielly? Well, I like Morgan Rielly a little bit, and I also like Brian Burke. Now, Brian Burke still believes Morgan Rielly was the best player of the 2012 NHL draft. A quote from Brian Burke is, quote, "We had our video guys. He cut every shift he played. I watched from start to finish, and I watched it twice. I was convinced he was the best player. And now you look at the draft, there are a couple of good players in there, but Morgan was the best," unquote. Is he the best, Mike, or is Burke just trying to make himself look a little bit better here? Now, I've got a list of the first 11 picks that were in the draft. You get Yakupov, Ryan Murray, Alex Galchenyuk, Griffin Reinhart, Morgan Rielly was number 5, Hampus Lindholm, Matt Dumba, Derek Pouliot, Jacob Truba, and then this name I don't even know who he is, Slater Kokakek, whoever the hell that is, and number 11, Philip Forsberg, who I like as a good player. So I guess, Mike, you went over the whole draft. I only went over the first round. What do you think? Is Brian Burke barking up the wrong tree here?
Well, I mean, in hindsight, obviously, yes, he is. And I mean, if he's trying to defend picking Riley in hindsight,
That's kind of
then
what
he's
it looks like.
delusional. And I like Brian Burke. He's always been a favorite of mine. I've always liked, his style. Um, However, with that being said, I mean, out of the first 5 picks, yeah, Morgan Riley's the best guy that was picked. However, when you look through the draft, and just alone in the first round, there was Philip Forsberg, as you said, who's been, a very good player, whom I would
Excellent
probably
player.
pick over Morgan Riley as well.
Yep,
Uh, Tom Wilson was picked in the first round, and he'd have been a great fit in Toronto. The fans would have just loved having a player like Tom Wilson there.
darn right.
Andre Vasilevsky, clearly one of the best goalies since he's come into the league. Um, and we all know Toronto's had some goalie issues over the years. So,
Definitely.
like he'd have been a great fit in Toronto as well. Thomas Hurdle was picked in the first round. Um, and then after the first round, in the third round, Shane Gostisbehere was picked, who
Ah,
similar style as
yeah,
Morgan Rielly. However, if I'm choosing between the two, I probably would have gone with the pedigree that Morgan Rielly had. So, however, one of the other best players that was in this draft was picked in the fifth round, who also would have been a great fit in Toronto, and that's Connor Hellebuck was
ah,
picked.
yes,
So, um, coincidentally, looking through the draft history for this draft, the majority of the players that actually turned out to be decent NHLers were the goalies. The two I mentioned, Linus Ullmark was picked in this draft as well in the I think 6th round. So um, now, from Brian Burke's standpoint, if you're looking to pick a specific position, then yes, then Morgan Riley's probably the best defenseman to be picked. But as far as the best player goes, though, I really don't think that's the case, especially when you had two franchise goalies like Vasilevsky and Hellebuck that were there for the taking. So,
right,
and I mean, I know Hellebuck was, like I said, picked in the 5th round. So, I mean, very overlooked. And, at the time, perhaps he was probably forecasted to be a 5th round pick. However, now, if we redid the draft today, I think him and Vasilevsky go 1 and 2. So, and you can flip a coin on which one's which. But I mean, if it's me, I go with Vasilevsky only because he's got a couple of Stanley Cup rings to go with it. So,
yep. Tested and true,
Um,
right?
but yeah, so I mean, if Toronto's picking by a position, then sure. But if it's me picking, and thinking back to that draft, because I remember the Flyers picked the pick immediately after Tampa Bay, and I was so hoping that Vasilevsky was going to drop to them because the Flyers haven't had a goalie in forever, and Vasilevsky was ranked as the best goalie going into that draft. So I was hoping he'd slip to Philadelphia, and of course, one pick later, we picked the great Scott Lawton, who hasn't done a whole lot. So pardon the pun.
So that would have been one of those times where you wish that Philly would have traded up in the draft.
Absolutely. Also in that draft, another guy that I was hoping that would slip to them. If they didn't get Vasilevsky, I was hoping they'd have got Tom Wilson because Flyers fans would have loved a player like Tom Wilson. I mean, has the perfect style to play in Philadelphia. So,
Right, right.
but we got neither. We got a third line center, classic Flyer draft strategy. So
A little bit of you seem a little bit upset by that. So I didn't know I
yeah,
was going to bring that out on you with that question, but
the thing is, and I mean, I don't want to harp about the Flyers drafting because I mean they have gotten some good players. However, I think the players they look for when they're drafting is they want a good all around player. They don't seem to draft guys that stand out offensively.
right.
They always seem to pick a guy that will, is good defensively, plays physical, chips in some points. But problem is the guys that play like that in junior, you can't develop offense in the NHL generally. You have to have it coming into the NHL. So to think that they can pick a guy that's good defensively and plays physical, how much offense are you going to get out of these guys? There's not a lot. I mean, there's some exceptions. Obviously, if you look at the Tkachuk brothers, I mean, they're very good in all regards. So you know, and they were high first round picks as well. So I mean, that's the thing. Like, I just wish the Flyers would look more at picking top end offensive talented guys that might not be as great defensively. I mean, and this year they've got Mitchkov playing, who when they drafted him, he wasn't known for his defense. So I mean, it's a little bit of a changing of the guard as far as uh, thought process for picking because I mean Mitchkov's an offensive player. He's done pretty good this year. He's had his ups and his downs, but long term, I think he's exactly what they're looking for.
Well, I wanted to ask this question with Brian Burke, especially because Brian Burke had a lot to do with Morgan Rielly being picked where he was. Obviously, he was talking about it. That's why I wanted to ask it. And when I was looking at some of these players, I'm like, man, really the best player in the draft? I don't know about that. But it's nice that you went through. I only went through the first round. You went through the whole draft, so it's nice that you picked those, especially the goalies, out of that. And we can say that Brian Burke may be trying to justify his pick a little bit. That's kind of what it sounds like to me. So
Yeah, and I mean, and as I said, when I looked through the entire draft, I'll be honest, the draft was very weak. There was, I think, maybe 15 guys that had good NHL careers or are still having good NHL careers. Most of the guys picked either didn't make it or they've been minor league players or very low depth players on the NHL team. So, like when you named off the top 11 picks, like how many of those guys did anything for any length of time? I mean, some of them had a couple good seasons, but
yeah,
you
I
know,
mean Galchenyuk, Ryan Murray, Yakupov, the list goes on and on here, right?
yeah, there was a lot more busts than hits in
Yeah,
this draft. So
Matt Dumba, Jacob Truba. I mean, yeah, I mean, you know, all know names that we know, but a lot of them didn't do a whole lot. Philip
yeah,
Forsberg, obviously the best player there, point wise
he
anyway,
was probably the best
consistency.
forward in the draft.
Yeah,
Like in hindsight, looking back, Forsberg, Wilson, and Thomas Hurdle were
right.
the top forwards. So
Well, I like Burke, and when I read that, I was like, "Well, I think we're gonna have to talk about that a little bit tonight." I thought it was quite interesting. So,
Yeah, I
but
mean, I love Brian Burke. I love the way he, speaks out, speaks his mind. It doesn't really care for what other people think of his opinion, obviously. So, you know, but but yeah, I mean, like you said, he might just be trying to justify the pick, but hindsight shows otherwise.
all right. Well, let's go to our fourth topic for this evening, Mike. And this is a little something a little bit different. I don't usually talk about this. The NHL Power Rankings from the Score website from Monday, January the 27th. These rankings were done after the big trade here with Colorado and Carolina and Chicago. And this is where they rank the top eight. And I just want to get your, how you feel about this. Okay, Mike?
Yep.
Washington Capitals were number one. Winnipeg was number two. Edmonton was number three. Carolina was number four. Dallas number five. Vegas number six. The Los Angeles Kings, Mike, were number seven. And number eight was the Florida Panthers. Do you agree with these rankings at all, Mike? Or is the Score just got it all wrong? They don't know what the hell they're doing.
Well, if it's me, I probably bump the Kings down. The rest, I mean, they're pretty close. I mean, you can flip one or the other. However, for me, and I mean, I guess through the whole year so far, I've been waiting for the Kings to just fall apart, so to speak, but they
Right. Yeah.
haven't. Now, with that being said, I still would rank Florida above the Kings, and I would probably put LA in probably contention with, I'd say, Minnesota for that eighth spot. So,
Right. Right.
um, I mean, and that's current. I mean, looking long term, for teams that are built for the playoffs, I think Florida would probably get bumped up a little bit in that regard. They're the defending champions. They've got a lot of the same guys they had last year. I think they're going to make a move or two at the deadline to get better. So, but as of right now, those uh, the rankings that they've got, they're pretty close. I mean, you can flip a coin on some of those teams, but they're fairly accurate, except for the Kings, I would say. So,
Okay. All right. That's good. That's good. I kind of felt that it was reasonable. So
yeah,
I was like, oh, let's talk about this a little bit. All right. Well, Mike, we want to go on to our hockey prophet segment where you are the hockey prophet. And I've got a list of some rapid fire questions here, Mike. So I've got my timer all ready again this week. 3 weeks in a
glad you're on
row.
a
I'm,
roll.
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. A lot better than I did at the opening when I was trying to say Carolina, Colorado, and Chicago. I couldn't do it. But anyway, we got it done. So, Mike, are you ready for the hockey profit segment?
Yeah,
All right, here we go. Number one. Will Sidney Crosby be very happy to be playing on the Four Nations Cup so he can finally play with a real NHL lineup?
yeah, I think so.
Number two, the most exciting team to watch play this year besides the Flyers. You're not allowed to say the Flyers.
Most exciting team this year?
Most exciting team you've watched play this
Boys.
year.
It'd be a surprising team. I think the Washington Capitals.
Well, I have to agree. I've watched a few Washington games. They've been really good. It's been
Yeah,
really fun to
and
watch.
that and the Ovechkin chase to try to catch Gretzky's record, so that kind of adds to it.
All right. Number three, hot or not, Mike? Connor Bedard, he has 1 goal and 3 assists in his last 5 games, so 4 points in 5 games. He is a +1. Is Connor Bedard hot?
I think so. I mean, based off of what he's got to play with on that team, if you can get a point a game on that team, you're doing pretty good.
All right. Number four, most likely to miss the playoffs, and I've got them listed in order here, Mike. Ottawa Senators, Boston Bruins, Tampa Bay Lightning. Those teams are indeed listed sixth, seventh, and eighth in the East right now.
Hmm. Most likely to miss. I,
Most likely to miss out of those three. What do you think? Any of them? Maybe none of them.
I think if any of those three teams miss, I think it's going to be Ottawa.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Fair enough. And finally, Mike, number five, and I know that you will be glad when this is all over with. The Flyers had a nice win Monday against the Devils, Mike. Pretty nice win for them. Mike, are the Flyers goalies hot?
And then I can't say that they are. I'll say no.
Are
However,
they Luke
Urson has looked good up until the last game against the Devils when he got pulled. So, um, no, I don't think they're hot. Unfortunately,
lukewarm? Lukewarm, maybe?
lukewarm will go with.
Okay.
They're like your faucet taps there. You turn the hot on, and once it gets too hot, you got to turn it off, and then they're cold again. So
That's right.
yeah. So
Okay, well, and that's it for the questions, Mike. But I just wanted to say, I see that tonight you have another exciting game to watch between the Flyers and the Islanders. I bet you can't wait to dig into that.
yeah, I've actually been watching it there a little bit. That's why you've seen me look up a few times because I've been checking the score. So
It's just because you said the Islanders are the most boring team to watch in the
yes, yes, they
NHL.
very much are. And it's a classic boring game too. It's currently 1-0, and the second period's almost over for the Islanders. So
Is there anything else, Mike, you wanted to add to tonight's discussion?
um, no, not really tonight, but I think maybe next week we'll start to get into the Four Nations
Yep,
a little bit, maybe a little bit
absolutely.
more into the Four Nations games. Um, there was another thing that I wanted to bring up. Boys, I think I lost it though. But going into the Four Nations Cup, I mean, the NHL had talked about recently about the World Cup coming back in 2026, I believe.
Yeah, I remember
So,
them talking about it.
so I'm curious as to when they do start talking about that. I know it's next year, I guess now.
Yep,
2026 comes up fast, but I'm curious where this whole situation with Russia is going to be at the time because I don't know because I think they would really like to have Russia in, but the situation's still the same, I don't think they're going to be. So I'm kind of curious as to how they're going to do this World Cup of Hockey next year when it comes to um, not having Russia and who they're going to have to replace. Because I mean, the last time they had was it the North American All Stars? I
yes,
think it was. So
yep.
um, so yeah, we'll have to see what happens there. Maybe they'll talk more about it there between now and maybe now in the Four Nations Cup because I know the Four Nations Cup's going to get the international buzz going, I guess. So
It is. It's going to get some press. I mean, it's
yeah.
definitely going to get some press. People want like I'm going to be very interested to watch it. So I can't wait to see some of these games. So
Oh, and I do recall what I was going to bring up actually because reporters have recently been asking Sidney Crosby about potentially being traded.
oh,
And
really?
yeah, there was talk about it, and he kind of shot it down pretty quickly. He's like he's focused on being the best player on his team or the best teammate, I should say, not the best player for his team, and because there was talk that perhaps this Colorado trade was to create a little bit of room at the trade deadline to bring Sidney Crosby in. So and I really think Crosby's going to be a lifer in Pittsburgh. However, and I think I said this in the past, if there was one team he would go to, it would be Colorado to play with
Well,
McKinnon. So,
we talked about this, and you said exactly that same, just what you said now. You said that, oh man, this is going to be
yeah, I know that conversation
several
was
months ago.
months ago now.
Yep.
So,
But you did
um,
say it.
I basically think that Pittsburgh and Crosby would have to have a mutual agreement if they were to explore that. I don't think Pittsburgh would attempt to trade Crosby whatsoever unless he said, "Yeah, listen, I'd be willing to go." But I don't know if he would. I think he wants to play with one team his whole career. So, but we shall see. I mean, Gretzky got traded too, so who knows? I think the percentages are 99% that he stays in Pittsburgh, but I know that Colorado would give up a pretty good chunk of first round picks and prospects to get him, I think. So we'll see.
That would be one hell of two lines on that team. Only
Yeah,
jumpers. Well, it would have been even better if they would have been
absolutely.
able
I
to keep
think,
Rantanen.
if Colorado would somehow be able to pull this off, instant cup contender. I mean, they're still a contender. However, if they were able to get Crosby, that's, you don't get players like that generally. So,
And it is a little more freewheeling in the West too. I mean, he'd be
yeah,
out West, and he would probably receive more points at West. I think if he were playing more games out there, I think he would anyway.
yeah. Oh,
So
absolutely.
that's very interesting. Very interesting. All right, Mike. Well, I think we'll leave it there for tonight. It's a great spot to end it. So like, share, and subscribe, folks. And if there's anything that you think we did wrong or said wrong, leave a note in the comments. That's what the comment section is for. And we will see you next week. Later.
Later.